I'm 3 off interviewing you, so I'm not even halfway.
Oh
so.
yeah, that we just agreed that when Rob came in that once you do 5, you get to be in the host chair or BL. You have to do 5 or BL to be in there. So the last time we were on episode 35, Penny, is that right? So more than 100 guests ago, and January 24.
Yeah.
How was your world changed since then?
It's funny, right? Because you don't pause and look back to think about it, but I mean, incredibly so. So just if you kind of fast forward to today, we are now a team of 20 people. We are 25% owned by West Yorkshire Pension Fund. We launched a £25 million seed portfolio, and we've just raised more money from a very large UK DC pension fund. And crucially, we've done, I think, the world's first true payment for ecosystem services with an oyster reef off the coast of Norfolk. So, people comment on my LinkedIn and go, "Are those oysters for eating?" No, we've basically restoring or building a 4 million oyster reef, which will grow and develop, and that's cleaning 800 million liters of water every day for free by nature, and it's restoring marine biodiversity, and it's providing coastal protection. And Nestle Purina are paying for that, and that money then goes to pay the members of the West Yorkshire Pension Fund, which is what we always wanted to do. Now we just need to do that many times over.
I love it. I love everything about your business and the fact you're in the sector. If it wasn't for you and other awesome people leading businesses forward, like, the sector's changed so much in 2 years. It's like a decade in a day almost. It's jumped.
Can I give you an example?
Do, yeah, of course.
So you had Tony Juniper on, and I don't know if you've seen the new Natural England strategy, but to hear Tony Juniper and the board talking about nature as infrastructure, that is
you're the first person I heard voice that.
Is I think a real shift in mindset. And I think for me, it is a bit like the Fosbury Flop or the 4-minute mile, because it shifts the perception of nature as something either we cut down for wood or we harvest for food as a commodity, or it's something we'd give money to, and isn't it nice? Rather than thinking about it like a road or a port or a hospital or a school. And I think it's funny how what you name something, I think, really matters. And once you start to label it as nature as infrastructure, that's really important, because I think that starts the ability to finance it and make it a financeable asset, and therefore make it an investable asset class.
Let's keep pulling at that thread, because I think one of the most unique perspectives you bring to play is genuinely understanding how institutional capital is accessed and works. That isn't the world I come from. I come from the data and tech side of it. You very much come from that financial world. How important is the language, the nomenclature to making those allocations work for us?
Yeah, hugely. I mean, the really interesting thing is why people often ask me why the UK, apart from the fact that I'm British, but the UK has the second largest pension and wealth management market in the world, £5 trillion. You, all of your staff, everyone listening to this in the UK, either probably belongs to a local government pension scheme like West Yorkshire, or to a big master trust like Scottish Widows or Nest or any of these big ones. And what's happening right now in the UK is they're being consolidated under what's called Mansion House. And the UK's realized if we can copy what they've done in Australia and Canada, we can start to channel some of that money into the UK. Now, they were thinking about channeling it into roads, infrastructure, real estate, residential. They weren't thinking about channeling it into natural capital. And that's where the aha is, because if you can make infrastructure an asset class, you can make it investable. And sort of 20 years ago, I was advising UK pension funds to fund building new roads in Scotland. So it was 20 years ago, the Glasgow South Orbital was funded by pension fund capital with an offtake agreement to basically address congestion and air pollution. And then 15 years ago, I did the same with offshore wind and solar panels. I used to advise the Aviva staff pension scheme, and I remember getting them to invest in this. And in order to get a pension fund to invest, they have to change what's called their investment beliefs. And their investment beliefs is, just think of it as like the software that says what can we and can't we invest in. And one of the things is like, what are the asset classes we can invest in? Equities, bonds, real estate, and private equity. And this is the thing that's crazy. 15 years ago, most UK pension funds didn't have infrastructure as an asset class. So 15 years ago, I was advising pension funds to say, hey, there's this thing called infrastructure and it's an asset class, and invest in it. And therefore, the playbook is to do the same now, but for nature. And then if you position it next to infrastructure, we already do that. It feels familiar. And then we can go, okay, well, how can I invest in nature? Now, the key thing is, when we were investing in infrastructure, you were being paid an offtake agreement to turn wind into electricity, into money, or you'd have a toll, you'd build a road, take the M6, and there'd be a toll for it. And so crucially, there needs to be a cash flow attached to it. And so the thing that we've been working on really since January 2024 is, can we derive a cash flow from the utility that nature provides?
And where are you seeing the most likely sort of first examples of being able to provide that offtake and that immediate connection?
Everything to do with water. So a couple of weeks ago, London Stock Exchange Group put out a report saying that of kind of G8 countries, the UK is the most exposed by population and by GDP to flooding. Now, in the last 25 years, if you were to get like a Met Office chart of the distribution of precipitation in the UK, what's happened is average precipitation has been increasing, but more importantly, the dispersion between heavy rainfall events and drought periods has been increasing, which is right now we're experiencing kind of what's called climate whipsawing, where the crazy thing is we could go down to Ardingly right now and that reservoir is still in drought in December, and it was pouring with rain this morning. In the next 15 to 25 years, as we hit 2.5 degrees C, that mean precipitation is going to go up by 25%. Uh, the uh, the peak worst months will increase probably 50%, and the worst will increase twofold to threefold. And we're hitting a degraded landscape. We're hitting a landscape where our soil is not in good health, our rivers are straightened and canalized, and we're just going to cause more and more flooding. And we already know that 1 in 6 homes in the UK is flooded, and that's going to 1 in 4. But we also know that 40% of our roads and railways will be flooded. We know that 3,500 of our supermarkets are already at risk of flooding right now, and 2,000 of them will suffer 30 centimetre surface water flooding. By the way, when you have 30 centimetres, you can't drive a lorry, you can't drive an ambulance, you can't drive a fire truck. Even this is a burning fire, you are not allowed to drive a fire truck through 30 centimetres of surface water. And that's the kind of clear reality that the UK is facing. And so a bit like cyber insurance 15 years ago, M&S and Jaguar Land Rover, the board weren't worried about cyber insurance and cyber resilience. No one was. It was an IT problem. These kind of climate risks are hitting the UK right now. Our GDP's at risk. Our assets are at risk. That's the bad news. The good news is there's this really cool kit called nature that just solves it or goes a long way to kind of mitigating it. And so instead of building concrete, which is what we've done, I mean, it's probably what you did in your previous job, it's saying, guess what? Peatland, river restoration, in the coast more for water quality, but oyster reefs are a cheaper, better way of cleaning our water, storing our water, reducing the flow. And the key thing is just using the same payment mechanisms. We use power purchasing agreements or offtake agreements or caps and floors. How do we borrow the language of infrastructure that we used for offshore wind and renewables and apply it to nature?
That's like an entire NatCap MBA in an opening statement, Rob.
Yes.
It's exceptional. Okay, a couple of questions from me there. Of the asset managers who are looking after these pension funds, what percentage of them are aware of the existential threats and risks that you just articulated, would you say?
2 years ago, so last time I was on, not at all. CDP did a report a year ago that's saying that like 1% of financial institutions are aware about water risks. I think the interesting thing coming out of COP30, which wasn't a great result, is that I think people now understand that adaptation, resilience, we need to do something about it. So we can argue about climate change, we can argue about who pays for it and how do we stop it, but no one's denying flood risk, drought risk, water quality risk. And so uh, more and more people are aware. Like earlier this year, Scottish Widows did a follow-up to their nature and biodiversity report, and they looked at their portfolio and they identified across all of their listed stocks that water risks were their biggest risk. So I would say there has been a big shift since I was last on in awareness of the problem. That's only half of it. The other big shift, which has been, I would have said what was one of the biggest blockers, is, are you telling me that peatland or a river restoration solves this problem and it's as good as or better than an engineered solution? So you need to both recognize the problem, the liability, but you also need to recognize the solution and the asset. And I would say the thing that's really helped unlock this is all the engineering consultancies. So the Atkins Realises, the Arups, the JBAs, the WSPs, all have natural capital and FM experts who bring that engineering discipline. So when you go and talk to Network Rail or you go and talk to a water utility and they go, is this right? Is this really our problem? Is this really our risk over the next 10 years? They go, yes. And then when they go, well, here's an intervention based on a portfolio of natural flood management tools, will it really reduce our risk by bronze 30%, silver 50%, gold 70%? And they go, yes. That is super, super powerful. And these are two things that have moved enormously in the last 2 years.
Where I think the wider sector owes you a big vote of thanks is you communicate differently from the rest of the sector. So you bring it in a language that the allocators and the asset managers understand. You also overlay beautifully just enough facts and figures to make it tangible and meaningful, but you don't go scientifically too heavy to make it inaccessible. How much do you think about the way you communicate these messages, or does it just come to you naturally?
I mean, I think about it a lot. The same challenge with Reddington and getting people to save and pensions and financial education. When you write a children's book, it really forces you to think about that. If you write a book to convince people to save for their pension, I mean, talk about, that's dull, right? So how do I convince people to engage with their future self? You force yourself. So I think that the thing that has helped me the most has been financial education. And then one of the things I always try and do is think about my personas. And I think, what language do I need to use to speak to a CIO or chair of trustees of a local government pension scheme? If I was meeting Richard Tice, how would I communicate to Richard Tice? How would I make it Reform's idea that this is a really good idea? If I'm meeting Natural England or DEFRA, there's a different mindset. Uh, if I'm meeting the CFO or COO of Heathrow, how do I meet him or her in their language? And so I think it's really important. And I think it's some of my kind of radical candor to the feet to the sector is too often they put themselves like, why don't you get it? And I go, but you haven't really tried to go and sit in Rich's shoes.
Yeah.
Being a CEO of a water company is really tough. It's easy to stand on the outside and go, they should go, they're rubbish and all the rest. We are where we are because of 25, 50 years worth of underinvestment, climate change and all the rest. This problem does not get fixed in 12 months or 3 years' time. Candidly, you couldn't pay me all of the money in the world to go and be CEO of Thames Water. And I think that's a real shame. I'm not saying I'm qualified to be CEO of Thames Water, but you want to attract the best people to go and do those jobs. And why would you go and do that? To be pilloried and all the rest. Right now, we've got a crisis and we need to get the best people into those jobs and engage with them, and not, oh, you should, and you're a bad company and you should do that, and go, well, let's work together. Let's collaborate. By the way, we've got a wetland, you've got a problem. Can we work together? Maybe we could co-fund it. What are your pain points? What's the language that matters to you? Oh, of what? Regulatory capital, ODIs. How can I frame what I have to offer in your language? Now it's a very different conversation. And I think that's the bit that I think is still missing in this ecosystem of actors who are trying to do the right thing.
We had the chief exec of Surfers Against Surge on last week, Giles Bristow, who was awesome. And I think I kind of presupposed he would be more challenging of the water companies. But actually, whilst acknowledging the challenges we faced, he was very similar to your perspective of, look, this is not an easy solution. You know, there's no one sat there trying to make the environment worse. It's just a consequence of decades of underinvestment and the realities of more people putting more pressure on a less resilient system in a changing and crumbling climate. So that's one of my favorite things about this podcast, finding whoever you sit opposite, you find way more commonalities than differences if you're prepared to have a decent conversation about it. Um, what's the next step? So you've had this playbook before in different contexts. What's the next step that's going to come in changing the allocator's mindset? Or maybe it doesn't even sit with them. What's the next step in the Rob Gardner playbook that's going to come?
Well, I think for me, that and another big question that a pension fund will ask, and if you think about it, these pools, so Central, which is one of the pools, now has 120 billion pounds. That's a big number. You know, Scottish Widows has 100 billion pounds. So if I'm going to get them to think about investing, so just the playbook on that side is, do we understand climate and nature risks? Yes, no. If we don't, get my investment consultant slash CIO. Have we got the right models? Do we understand that? 3, update my investment beliefs. 4, how are we doing on stewardship and engagement? This is the stuff that Scottish Widows did. 5, this is kind of what Cushion did. Let's start allocating to natural capital. Let's build a portfolio. So, West Yorkshire invested in us, Cushion invested in Aviva Investors, and I'm sure they'll be doing more. HSBC have appointed Fulcrum to build a natural capital sleeve for their DC fund. But then 6, we need to have climate and nature risks on what's this quarterly dashboard. So most pension funds every quarter will start the meeting with what's called a CIO update, where basically they say, this is what's happening in the economy. This is what's happening in geopolitics right now. This is what's happening to the price of oil. This is what's happening to cable, which means the exchange rate between the US dollar and the British pound. This is what's happening to the S&P 500. This is happening to bond yields. This is what happens to credit spreads. All of this, and zero mention of climate and nature. So we need to kind of close that gap. And that's on the asset side, and kind of normalize that. Then they go, okay, well,
Just pause on that. How is that gap? How is that achieved? What can we do to help in that process?
I mean, what I've just outlined, I say on every webinar, and encourage people to do. And it's about, the cool thing about the pension sector is it's not that many people you have to engage. It's only a small universe of professional trustees where you have to engage them and convince them that this is the right thing to do and put it on the agenda for 2026. And look, there's nothing like exemplars, right? You've got Cushion, which is a great exemplar. They've worked with Eversheds to figure out fiduciary duty. They've thought about real world decarbonisation.
We're hoping to get Veronica on in 26. We've been talking to her about coming on.
Yeah, I mean, brilliant. You should definitely get her on. And then they've been allocating to sort of natural capital. That creates a playbook. And so if you're a trustee, you need to kind of either accept or reject what they've done, right? It doesn't mean that what they've done is right, but I think it forces that tension to go, why have they done that? Why aren't we doing that? And make a conscious choice to do it or not to do it. But if you think about it, we've got all of these DC pension funds aggregated. That will be £1 trillion by 2030. We've got a £400 billion local government sector, which will become £800 billion. If they start allocating 2% to this sector, they need to know that they can deploy billions of pounds, not a few million pounds in an Oyster Reef here and there, and a bit of B&G. And so they need scale. Scale comes from these landscape nature recovery projects. And I know you've had Ed on from Great Yellow and the Evenode catchment, but that is £100 million infrastructure. If we use the language of infrastructure, that's £100 million investment to restore the land, to take it from degraded to restored, and to reduce the risk, and to put in place these offtake agreements, to generate biodiversity net gain units, to generate carbon credits. and create a bankable financial model. There's 52 of these in the UK. If we can unlock that and create a repeatable template where the lawyers don't have to go and do it from scratch, where we have a water resilience unit. So if we then go and do this, I don't know, in Norfolk, then we're not reinventing the wheel. At that point, we can really start to deploy money at scale. And this is the flywheel, because we can get this pension fund flywheel spinning if we can prove that we can make 10% from nature and restore nature and create green jobs and do what's called place-based investing and make the UK a more resilient and better place to live. That's a no-brainer. Why wouldn't you do that? But the question is, can we get that flywheel turning? And so what we need to do is more of the Oyster deals. Unlocking even load. If even load happens next year, that's amazing for everyone who lives in that catchment. But actually, the real thing is that becomes the rocket railway. That becomes the template that says we can now roll this out across the UK.
So explore that project in some detail for people.
So, I mean, basically, like every river catchment in the UK, it is heavily degraded. There is a farming cluster called the Northeast Cotswolds Farming Cluster, who have been worried about climate change, the impact it has on them. How can they work together to address a problem? But this is a catchment of about 3,500 to 5,000 hectares. If you had Oxford here and Swindon here and drew a line, it's the catchment that goes up around there. Jeremy Clarkson's farm, Diddley Squat, is kind of in the corner. So it's west of Oxford, north of Swindon. There is a railway line, which is the Chiltern Railway line, which goes from Moreton on Marsh all the way down through and ultimately down into Marylebone. And that railway line crosses the Evenlode River, which is not a big river, but over 20 times in 20 miles. And it floods a lot. And every time it floods, Network Rail has a formula. You can Google the formula, and they have to pay out. And it costs them about £750,000. As I said at the beginning, this problem is getting worse, and we can model what that will be over the next 10, 15 years. So this is many millions of pounds just on one railway line. Not only that, the railway line is being undercut and they can't really fix it. So Network Rail owns land, but they can't really fix the problem. To fix the problem, we need to take a catchment level approach. We need to make the whole catchment work in slowing down and storing the water. Thames Water have the same problem because they also have issues with CSOs. And that is both a combination of flooding and also flooding of the substations. SSEN is the district network operator. So there's all the substations. They're flooding. DEFRA's also has come up with a new flood funding model. So this is another piece of policy that's moving in the direction, which is saying we don't have enough money in the UK to deal with flooding issues, to deal with water quality issues. How do we incentivize private capital to come in and co-fund? And in fact, we'll prioritize using a formula where the more external private capital there is, the higher this will go up on that roadmap of prioritization. If we can create a model that says, okay, who are all the people who benefit from this and how much should they pay? And then on top of that, we generate a whole lot of biodiversity net gain units in an area that there's quite a lot of economic activity. And on top of that, we generate a whole lot of soil carbon credits at a point where, and we should talk about this later, about the Clyde & Co deal and IS37 and IS38, and the kind of, I think more and more UK companies want to buy UK carbon credits. Then all of a sudden, we take a project that requires 100 million of capital today and generates 400 million pounds worth of cash flows over the 25 to 30 years. This is exactly what pension funds have been funding forever. This is pension fund capitalism 101, except it's never been nature at a catchment scale. Now, the interventions are regen ag. It's about stop using pesticides and fertilizers. It's about focusing on soil carbon and soil health. It's about mixed crop farming. It's about river restoration. It is about reintroducing wetlands. It's riparian trees. It's an entire catchment. And guess what? Atkins Realis are the ones doing that modeling on behalf of Network Rail and the rest to go, yes, this is the problem and this is the solution. And so to make that happen, you need a firm like Great Yellow to pull it together. You need Tim and Tim from the Northeast Farming Cotswolds cluster to pull together 50, 60 farmers and say, are we up for this? Shall we do this? We need Defra and Natural England to go, are we really going to do this? They're going to have to do something they've never done before. And that will or will not unlock all of this. And then Network Rail and Thames Water and SSEN to say, oh, we'll pay for clean water. We will pay to reduce that water risk, to reduce that flooding, and then originate a whole load of biodiversity net gain and a whole load of carbon credits. And now let's talk about the finance package. When you or I buy a home, we need what's called equity, and then we get a mortgage. Typically, when you do infrastructure, you do the same. You have what you call an infrastructure equity investor, and then you have banks who like to provide the senior debt. We're using that same playbook where the project equity will probably be funded by Rebalance Earth and other co-investors, the National Wealth Fund, some people who want to co-invest on that deal. And then senior banks will provide the loans, people like NatWest, people like Lloyds Bank, people like HSBC. And all of a sudden, we have created £100 million landscape restoration that doesn't only become a template for the UK, but I think becomes a template for nature restoration at scale for the world.
So in terms of typical cost of capital for that, what would the cost of capital of the equity be, and what would an example, I'm not talking about a specific project, right, but an example of the equity and of the senior debt?
Yeah, look, I mean, high level, we're targeting 10% net return. So let's say 10, and senior debt might be 6 to 7%.
Okay.
So you might be coming in at, let's say, 8, which is, by the way, not a million miles away for if we wanted to build new hospitals or new
What would
roads.
it have been in the road side? Similar in the road side?
Yeah, similar, maybe 1% low on an aggregate level, but yeah, pretty similar. This is we're trying to price this like core infrastructure.
I love it. And the water resource credit type approach in this project, would that be fundamental to the business case for it?
Yeah, I'd rather not use credit. This is an offtake agreement.
Okay.
So, a power purchasing agreement is an agreement
That's what
between.
you said, unit, right?
I meant a unit to create a standardized metric so that when Anglian Water do the same deal in Norfolk, we're not reinventing how effective was that natural flood management. What we need to be able to do is go, these interventions store this much water, and that is that valuable to you, and you should pay that much.
And in terms of that, is that something you're developing, or are others looking at it at the moment?
Others are looking at it. I mean, we're also part of the Flood Action Coalition, which also kind of launched in November. Again, this is something that like-minded firms are working on. And I think really this needs to be led by those kind of engineering consultancies that I talked about, because they're, in my world, the profits of everything are the actuaries. How much are my liabilities? What does this mean? How long will people live? In the engineering world, what my engineering consultant says or doesn't say about this project really matters. So kind of getting them on board to say, this is the problem, and yes, this is the solution, and this is how confident we are, and making sure that what we do in even load is the same in Norfolk, is the same if we go up and do it on the Irwell. That is how we unlock things at scale.
That's
and move
really
fast.
Exciting. Are there any other pots of capital that you think are sort of ready and should be coming to this sector? I mean, already you've talked about the pension funds, and in that analogy, you've got the banks coming in with senior debt.
I mean, I think if we unlock this, the senior banks all want to do what's called green loans, sustainable finance. I mean, if you're a UK bank, this is perfect. That all of a sudden they get to all hit their targets, right? And if you think about it, all of those UK banks are heavily exposed to farmers in the UK. So this de-risks the assets that their loans are against. So if we, not only does it crowd in that pension fund capital, it potentially crowds in billions and billions of pounds of senior debt.
I love it. You mentioned Clyde and Co. Do you want to jump to there and help people
Yeah.
understand the impact of that?
So a few weeks ago, Nature Broking and Clyde and Co announced the forward purchase of a whole load of carbon credits. But the interesting thing there was the accounting treatment. So normally what happens if you're a company buying carbon credits is you have to pay for it and it basically comes out your profit and loss. Now, what will change this whole sector is if I can start to do these things in a way that doesn't impact my P&L. And so this is kind of like accounting magic. But the first thing is IS 37. I need to recognize something as a liability. And so Clyde and Co go, well, we've declared that we want to be net zero by 2050. We're obviously taking all our actions. We've reduced our carbon footprint, but we understand even in a net zero world, we still need to buy carbon credits to reduce the remaining amount. And by the way, a technicality, SBTI have just changed some of the framing that also makes it easier for companies to do this. So all of a sudden, that I'm now recognizing that I have a future commitment, a future obligation to kind of buy carbon credits, and that becomes a liability. Then at the same time, if I buy an asset and then I buy a forward purchase of carbon credits for a number of years, I can now run that through IS 38 and treat that as an asset that offsets my liability. And therefore, that doesn't impact my P&L. That is extremely helpful if you're a CFO of a company and you're thinking about doing these things. And you can start to go, okay, we have a liability. If we purchase these things, we can treat it as an asset and we can basically put nature on the balance sheet. And that's what this unlocks. So again, that didn't exist 2 years ago. This is huge. I don't think what Nature Broking and Clyde & Co did has got enough limelight exposure because I think this is a huge unlock for the sector.
There's so many pieces. I wrote something a few weeks ago. There's always a time lag between writing something and when it comes out, but I wrote something about describing now feeling like the golden age of natural capital because every day there's something, perhaps not as impactful as that, but something different that moves the needle a bit. I remember being invited to an event at Mansion House with Julius and Veronica where they'd done a piece with, was they Eversheds?
It was with Eversheds. It
Yeah,
was
about
March.
fiduciary responsibility. And that again didn't get the traction it needed in terms of changing how pension fund trustees not just could but should think about the future. Can you talk a little to that?
Yeah. So pension funds have to act in what's called fiduciary duty, which is act in their members' best interest. And this goes back to the 1980s and basically gets simplified that in our members' best interest is we should really invest in the highest returning stuff. And therefore, the highest returning stuff might actually be sort of bad for the planet. And trustees have often struggled with ESG, impact investing, sustainability, because they're worried that they might get challenged or sued over fiduciary duty. What Cushion and Eversheds did is they said, not only should we take into account our members' future, like have I grown their money to be worth £100,000, £500,000, £1 million when they retire, but I also need to take into account the world that you and I are going to retire into. Because you're probably going to retire here in the UK. Like if you're a local government pension scheme, if you're Cushion, 90% of your members are going to retire here in the UK. And what that does is it says, well, you can now take into account what are you doing with your investments? Is it making it worse for your members in the future? And or how are you making it better? And so this kind of plays into what I really like about what Cushion have done is that they've come up with this idea of portfolio real world decarbonization. So we invest in lots of companies around the world. How are we engaging with them? Portfolio decarbonization, real world decarbonization. So let's start investing in stuff that makes the world a better place. That might be offshore wind, solar panels, batteries, stuff that addresses that. And then the third thing is portfolio resilience. What stuff that we can invest in that actually makes our members more resilient? Are other assets more resilient? And that those kind of three ways of thinking about portfolio construction are really helpful. And that new ruling on fiduciary duty makes it a lot easier for pension fund trustees to kind of sign up to that way of thinking.
I think we're seeing so much of it at the minute. And yeah, each one of those is a key step that we need to make to create the whole market and asset class. One of the things we need to do is genuinely attracting pension funding. And you've done that with North Yorkshire, which is incredible achievement. Can you talk about how that deal came about?
Yeah. So the West Yorkshire Pension Fund. uh, I mean, look, I've spent 25 years working in finance. I spent over 22 years working with pension funds. So I don't underestimate how important it is to be known by, trusted, respected by an industry group. I think when people saw that I'd left Reddington to go to SJP, people were surprised. And then I think when people saw me leave SJP to set up or co-found Rebalance Earth with Waleed, people thought I was crazy, but they were like, hey, this guy's done crazy, interesting stuff before. So let's find out what he's up to. And
Just on that crazy point. So we had a dream guest for me. Not that you're not a dream guest, Rob. Of course you are, but you're also my friend. We had a dream guest for me just earlier today, Alok Sama, who was the author of The Money Trap and was the CFO at SoftBank. So 100 billion investment fund when he was there.
wow.
And I asked him the question because he worked with Masahiro-san, who is like regarded as the crazy guy, the crazy futurist. I said, do we need more discipline in the world or do we need more crazy? And he's like, now we need more crazy. We need the people who are willing to try and change things for the better. So I'm glad people think you're a little bit crazy.
Yeah, yeah, crazy good. Hopefully,
Yeah,
not
absolutely.
crazy bad. Uh, so yeah, a lot of people were interested in speaking to me. I think this is one observation I'd make back to the earlier comment about selling. In September, I said to the team, I want to do 1,000 meetings between now and December the 19th. So like 4th of September to 19th, I go on holiday on the 19th of December. Let's do rolling 2-week sprints. You've got to go and speak to people. It's the Dan Priestley stuff. It's 7 hours, it's 4 meetings, 11 touch points. And I don't think enough people do that. So that is the crazy plus the discipline.
it
And I
is.
think people underestimate the
And the hard
discipline
work.
and the hard work.
People say, oh, why is Rob at that conference? Because he goes, because he turns up, because he gets there, he does the miles. And they're not free in every sense of the word. A, they're expensive. B, we talked about this before we started rolling. There's a cost at home for families, and every night you are away. We've literally just rejigged the structure of the senior leadership team. So up until recently, I've had all the heads of and directors reporting into me, 11 across the board. I'm not going to be there next year. I need to do 1,000 meetings in a year. So we've had to rejig that so the business can work better without me to allow me to go do that. Still need to figure out the home bit, but we'll get there.
Yeah, no, it is hard. So I think it's kind of crazy and 1,000 meetings. And then the LinkedIn posts and the podcasts and
Momentum.
yeah, momentum, that kind of flywheel. And it luck, circumstance.
How do you think about luck?
I mean, I sign up to the Gary Player quote that the more I practice, the luckier I get. Right. I mean, I think that's so that's back to my 1,000 meetings.
Yeah.
If you have 1,000 meetings, if you only have 10 meetings, that's luck. If you have 1,000 meetings, luck runs in your favor.
We were at one of our teams. So every quarter, we bring the whole team together at one of the estates. It helps having the estates to do that with. And one of the junior members of the team went, oh, all the people you've met, Rich, they're all amazing. They're all really good. You've been really lucky with that. And Dave, who's our head of operations that I've known for 20 years, he went, no, you just see the highlight reel. You haven't seen the hundreds of terrible meetings he had, especially early in his career, that it's just like, go to the next one, go to the next one. Got to kiss a lot of frogs, right?
You absolutely have to do it. And look, business knows this. I mean, McDonald's trains people to say, do you want fries with that? And that's worth just that one training is worth billions and billions of dollars every year. Because 9 out of 10 times people say no.
We haven't talked about this. Are you a football man at all?
I'm not, no.
Do you know-
Tennis, Formula One.
Okay. There's a famous story on this. a player who like changed the world of football was Eric Cantona when he went from
Yeah,
Leeds
yeah,
to
I
Man
remember.
United,
Yeah, yeah.
and that literally happened because Leeds used to ring up every year and try and buy this one player from Man United called Dennis Irwin, and they said no every time. And Alex Ferguson walked past the chief executive, just said, "Ask him about Cantona." And they said, "Oh, Cantona wouldn't be available, would he?" "Yeah, actually, he's been a pain. We'll sell him." You never get the deal you don't ask the question on. So
100%. Yeah, you need to be in there. So look, uh, Leandros, who, I'd known 15, 20 years, had taken on the role of CIO at West Yorkshire Pension Fund. It was clear back then that sort of pooling was happening. Uh, Leandros, I suppose, wanted to kind of shift the perception of West Yorkshire. It was a £20 billion fund, had a very interesting setup in that it was able to buy equities and make investments on its own. He had an investment team that could do it. It's fair to say that I think on sustainability stuff, they were probably more bottom quartile. It was like, well, what can we do to really shift the needle and make West Yorkshire Pension Fund be right up there? They work with Pensions for Purpose, who I think you know well, and revisited all their investment beliefs. And they did a big process and they kind of mapped it to the UN SDGs. And we're like, where do we want to kind of place our chips and really make a focus? And I suppose this is one of those. And I think, you know, not only do you need the crazy people, you need the second crazy person. And so there's a brilliant 4-minute TED talk. There's a bunch of people on a hill, and a guy gets up topless and he starts dancing. And for about 30 seconds, it's quite uncomfortable. This guy's just dancing topless on his own on the side of a hill, and everyone's just sat there watching. And then eventually the second person gets up and starts dancing with him. And then by the end of the video, everyone's got up and everyone's dancing. And change happens when you get that second follower.
yeah, it does.
And that happened with Reddington and Frank Shinella. That happened with Rebalance Earth and West Yorkshire. It happens with, Nestle and Purina. Then we need others. And that's because we, as humans, I always say that we're motivated by 3 things or 4 things: cash, kicks, or kudos, and fear. Unfortunately, our government is motivated by fear. They don't want to do stuff and look stupid or come back. And so they've got a very different risk appetite to you or I. Some people are motivated by cash. Some people are motivated by kicks and kudos. You don't go and work for a local government pension fund for cash. You work in the city. So what are the drivers? It's kicks and kudos. And so they came up with this new set of investment beliefs. Leandros is incredibly cerebral and could see like how this was all playing out, Mansion House, pooling, and he saw an opportunity to prove their capability to make direct investments, to take a stake in Rebalance Earth, so they own 25%, copy the Australian model. IFM are big infrastructure managers owned by Australian pension funds, and then kind of unlock this theory of change. And of course, he knew me and he'd seen what I'd done with Reddington, seen what I'd done with Mallow Street, seen what I'd done with Red Start. So in terms of that kind of execution capability, was able to do that. So that's kind of how that came about. And now Leandros is a CIO at the British Business Bank.
The relationship things are so important, aren't they? I do think that on so we have the most incredible array of new talent that's coming through, and we're just about to do our selection for our 2026 intern process. 2,000 applicants in 2 weeks.
Wow.
It's just silly, isn't it? It's filtering that was fun. So we cut it at 2 weeks because last year we had 2,000 in 6 weeks, and after 2 weeks we're like, we can't process 5,000 of these, so let's cut it there. I think AI and maybe some of the like legacy effects of COVID, the importance of the relationship bit. I don't think the next generation coming through are seeing it quite the way you just articulated. I think that's an opportunity for people who do want to differentiate themselves in the market, really focus on that early, because the talented people they meet early in their careers are the same ones they're going to meet in 10 years' time, just in more senior roles.
Well, look, we were talking about Dan Priestley, and some people are like, oh wow, Dan, but I've known him a long time. I
Yeah.
mean, a lot of the people I'm now able to pick up the phone to. I've known a long time. I've just known them 20, and you know them when you're 25. I've got a WhatsApp group which is, my summer interns from 1999. And that's what I try and say to our grads and interns. You're part of the Rebalance Earth 25 cohort, and in 2045, you'll all be really successful people that can help each other. But you've got to nurture that. I mean, I could basically apply that framework about capital to social capital
Yeah.
and relationships. Whenever I did a talk at London Business School a few weeks ago, and uh, the guy asked me for some career advice right at the end, and I said, look, I think there's three things. There's your intellectual capital, there's your social capital, and there's your financial capital. Your intellectual capital, don't stop learning. I mean, you and I are both voracious readers, listen to a lot of podcasts. Just keep learning. Don't stop at your degree or your master's. Social capital is about meeting people, but you have to maintain and grow those relationships. You can't just, I met you at a conference and then move on. You've got to invest in them and develop them. By the way, there are also relationships you should cull and cut out as well, right? So it's a two-way thing. And then the third thing is financial capital. It's about putting yourself in the position that you have financial freedom. And I think, one of the dangers I saw early on in my career is if you get a really good job that pays really well, it's quite easy to get trapped in that kind of commercial thing. So how do you create enough excess cash that you can say, you know what, I don't want this job anymore. I can walk away and do that. And that's probably the hardest bit for people to do.
In terms of the relationship capital side of things, how do you approach that in terms of systems and tools? Do you have a set CRM on everything? How do you manage all those relationships?
I mean, that's my number one CRM.
Yeah.
WhatsApp's my second CRM. I mean, of course, we have a CRM, LinkedIn, but I suppose when did I cotton onto this? Have you ever read Malcolm Gladwell's Tipping Point?
I have.
So in it, he tells the story of Paul Revere, and it's when the British are coming. And in America, everyone knows about Paul Revere because he basically gets up in the middle of the night and he rides through and he rides into every town and he says, the Brits are coming, get ready, get ready. The bit that people don't know is that night there were many Paul Reveres who got on their horses and rode into town. And we're like, who's this crazy guy called Rich Stockdale and Rob Gardner riding into town saying the Brits go back to sleep? But Paul Revere was well known and liked and trusted because he'd already traveled to the other towns and villages. And they're like, bloody hell, if Paul Revere's riding through our town at 2 a.m., we know who he is, we trust him, we better get our boots on and our muskets ready, and we better be ready.
Yeah.
And so that's the bit. And so I always remember, and in the book, he then goes on to say, people who are good at relationships know way more people. And it was the Yellow Pages book. So you get through the Yellow Pages, and then you have to be able to name how many people you know with that same name. And it's correlated with age. So the older you are, you should be able to do that. It's correlated with job. But in the book, he talks about connectors, and he says that connectors have an above average for their age and for their sector number of relationships. I remember reading this, and then I was sat at Merrill Lynch and I was looking around and I was looking at the people in mergers and acquisitions, the most successful people. And I realized that the most successful people weren't the most intelligent. I mean, everyone there's pretty much hardworking,
Yeah.
but it's the people who knew the most people, the people who could pick up the phone. There's someone right now who's picking up a deal and going, I don't want Netflix buying that. I'm going to call up Jared Kushner and I'm going to call up Trump and do that. Whether that's right or wrong or not, but
how the world
we
works.
need people who can pick up the phone and say, Rich, are we going to get this deal? Are we going to make this deal happen? And that takes trust, that takes respect. And it's very hard to do if it's a cold relationship, because it's like, who the
Completely.
hell is Rob Gardner and Rebalance Earth? Who the hell is
Yeah.
Rich Stockdale and Oxygen?
It is. Yeah. People don't appreciate the time. Again, the time and effort, the touch points, the sending that message. My biggest hack for people on that is no downtime. So we talked about Dan Martell.
No.
So he's like he's a bit Daniel Priestley-esque, but very much software as a service, a US version. They know each other actually.
Okay.
They do cross over. He talks about no extra time. So he does things where it's not costing him any extra time. So when I travel, I'll make a point of who are the people that are important to me in terms of relationship. And I do have a list, and you are ranked in order, and you've got a number against you in terms of how important you've got a number against you in terms of how important you are. And you'll get a message if I haven't checked in a while, just to say, look, hope everything's going well, or I love it when there's a natural reason to do it. So, you'll have done an awesome keynote somewhere, and I'll be like, I love that line, or I love this, because you don't want to pick up the phone for the first time in a year or two. You want to make sure you've had that touch point, but it takes time and it takes effort. And it's the thing that for a lot of people slips when the day job gets busy or everything else. But that's when you need to invest in them, right?
It is. I mean, it's that old advert, either Royal Mail or BT, where it's good to talk, or or I thought of you. Don't underestimate the power of an article or a
Yeah, if you
podcast,
think of
or
someone, tell them,
yeah,
send it. I think I'd
yeah.
always advocate that. Um, I mean, I'm setting up a load of your USPs, your ability to communicate, your ability to manage relationships. When you think about Rebalance Earth beyond you, what are the USPs of the business?
So I think that that's a really important point. Is you have to build a business that can run without you to have any long-term success. Being an FCA authorized firm, you have to have a succession plan. So like if I got run over by a bus, who could step in and make that happen? I think the other thing is you need a portfolio of skills, right? You need the Avengers of nature as an infrastructure. You need Professor Neil Entwistle, who is an expert in river restoration. You need Joe Murray, who is a seasoned CIO, but is also a mountain rescue, is also doing a
He's just
PhD.
awesome, isn't he? I
Yeah,
love
I
him.
mean,
I love him.
rescuing people on the weekend and investing in nature during the week. James Hurrell, our head of investments, Kirsty Willman, our COO, Waleed, our co-founder and CTO, who is just amazing at being able to like just take all of the data that's out there from land ownership and flood data, and then kind of reconstitute it, and then build a tool to say, oh, where is the flood risk to that substation? What does that mean? So yeah, I mean, like any team, you need to kind of put that together. You need to kind of go and hire the best and the brightest. The hard bit is creating that unifying culture, that vision of A, what are we all trying to achieve? And B, what are our values and behaviors that keep us on track? And ours are hustle muscle, radical candor, and have fun. And have fun sounds trite, but we work bloody hard. And I think I have to, we're a startup. Like, this is not easy. This is not this is not, we're a first time fund manager. There haven't been many of those in the UK in the last 2 years. We're a first time fund. And we're defining an entirely new asset class that's never been done before. This is, if you wanted an easy job or life, you shouldn't.
I got asked that the other day. Oh, what's hard about what you do? Everything.
Yeah.
Like every day's a fight for something, be it accountancy treatment, be it grants, be it local opinions, perspectives, planting schemes, restoration approaches. All of it's hard because we're doing it at a scale, a pace, in a way that the underlying infrastructure and system doesn't expect it to be done. It was set up for retirees, hobbyists, maybe NGOs. It wasn't set up for businesses. That's why all of it's hard.
So, yeah, hustle muscle. I think, it's so important. You've got to chase things down, never give up. I mean, my favorite tennis player is Rafa Nadal. I was trying to explain to my daughter the difference between Roger Federer and Rafa. And I love Roger Federer as well, but Rafa was a fighter who just never, ever, ever gave up. And, at Reddington, we lost so many clients who 5 years later became clients and became our best clients. But it's so easy to give up when you lose the first time, and not stay in the game, stay in the point. That's it's hard.
Uh, we need to tag for people who we've done 150 of these now, so I'm getting okay at it. Apparently, you have to do 300 to be good, so we'll get there eventually.
Halfway.
Yeah, halfway to being average. Aspirations. people will be screaming for me to ask you, where does the resilience in you come from to keep fighting? I'm not going to do it because we're pushed for time, but I am going to say, go back and listen to your first podcast, because you telling your backstory will help people really understand where that fight and resilience comes from. You mentioned talent coming into the sector, Johan, especially. Um, that's really exciting. I think we're seeing those clusters of talents form across businesses now, and it's why I got accused of being the cheerleader for the sector the other day, and someone used it almost as a criticism. I was like, "Thank you. That's exactly what I want to be." Because, like you guys, you mentioned Great Yellow, like the cluster of talent they've put together is
That's,
astonishing.
I'm seeing
Like,
Alex for
yeah,
straight after this. So.
yeah, so just love those guys. Restore as well. Gil moving across there was an amazing hire and get. So you are getting. It's a bit like for the basketball fans out there, these super teams that are coming together, and they are in. Nattergal, some great people
Yeah,
as
yeah. I mean,
well.
Archie's got a phenomenal team. Yeah.
And it is, again, 2 years ago, a lot of these people weren't in the sector, and we wouldn't have been able to attract them. So that now they're coming. I just feel the momentum of that talent has grown, yeah, exponentially over those 2 years.
But it's the diversification of perspective, right? Ed's a lawyer by training.
Yeah.
So you need the Benedicts of this world who you could just listen to him
Pure
out.
ecologist
Yeah,
environment. Yeah.
and talk about wildlife and birds and everything else. You need to pair that with a Gil. You need an Ed. You need an Alex, the charmer, the raconteur, the
Yeah.
sales guy. You pull all of these together. I talk about like how do you build the Formula One team for nature. That's like how do we like because there's another thing that doesn't get talked enough about in the sector. But if we were in business, if we're in Silicon Valley, is clock speed. What is the clock speed of your organization? And like how fast can you get stuff done? How fast can you ship stuff? We just pulled out a report, a market outlook report from an investment consultant, and it's a proper job. It's like 24 pages analysis. We turned that out in less than a week. It looked fantastic, and I promise you, at SJP, that would have taken a team of people like 4 to 6 weeks to turn out.
Scottish land reform, right? So the actual decision paper and documentation dropped late one evening. We'd got a response piece written, how it related to us, what it actually meant to us, signed off by the board, and we'd arranged a podcast with the leading land lawyer in Scotland, all released within 48 hours of that dropping, and it
Wow.
was astonishing. Like, and a lot of people in this room did that, so it was incredible. That speed is night and day different for the sector. Like it was it the sector has gone from being like the slowest banger racing to getting towards Formula One now. We're trying to get
and
there.
and we need that urgency to. I mean, we just don't have time, right? And so
No.
I think that the question is like, how do we apply playbooks? How do we not reinvent something? How do we take what we learned from infrastructure?
Yeah.
How do we apply it? And again, how do we just turn stuff around quickly? To be fair, Flood Action Coalition is a great example of like-minded people. Howden's, Aviva, UBS, Nattergal, us, WSP, and a whole load of amazing people coming together and go like, how do we scale this up? I actually think the consultations DEFRA did over the summer, and then their response with the new flood funding shows that they're listening. I think Natural England's new vision and ambition, I 100% can get behind. I think the question is, can they create the organizational capability and that clock speed to deliver on that vision and ambition?
When you mentioned it before about having to have a business that can run without you and you wanting your 1,000 meetings. How do you balance that? And this is me getting life advice. How do you pick up keeping in touch and being involved in what's going on versus being out front, being the face of the business? How do you balance those two worlds?
Well, I think in the early days of your business, you have to be,
Everything.
it's very different 15 years into Reddington than in the beginning of our businesses, right? We have to be championing and cheerleading our businesses, our teams. So that is hard. And look, I mean, that was a very real conversation I had with my wife, which is like, I've got 1,000 meetings, I've got so many nights out a week, whilst also trying to make sure that do everything at home. And There have been times in the last 16 weeks where those conflict, right? The hard thing is, I think, your personal relationships, so not to do with work and not family, that takes a toll. So I'm quite deliberate about once a quarter just putting in little. Went to Radiohead with a bunch of friends, went to Oasis before. uh the way you go with those friends, nothing to do with work, nothing to do with that, and you go, okay, I'm just going to have some me time, and 3 or 4 times a year, that's enough for me to kind of just keep that going. But it's hard.
We touched on Restore. So you guys are connected there. You made an investment there now. Can you talk
We've
about that a little?
Yeah, we've made, so part of our, how do you that playbook is, if you think about business, private equity, small businesses, pension funds investing in companies, uh, there's a whole bunch of market infrastructure, lawyers, brokers, that facilitate that. That doesn't exist in this natural capital market. And so as you sort of step back and look at the UK, I love board games, I love Monopoly, I love Catan. And you go, well, if this was a Monopoly board, what are the pieces you need on the Monopoly board to kind of make this happen? And so our first investment was in Oyster Heaven. So 10% of our fund can take what we call top co positions, so provide equity to other businesses and where we can be on the board seat. So we're like, hey, oysters are really cool. And we think you could probably deploy 1 billion of these over the next decade. So wouldn't it be really powerful if we were kind of part of the family? So not only did we invest in Project Luna and the Oyster Reef with Nestle Purina kind of partnering on that, but we also invested in George's business and Oyster Heaven. The second investment that we did was into Restore, into Benedict and Gil, and we're working on some great stuff. And it's a great example of where you kind of combine our kind of like finance nerds and Waleed's GPAP tool with Benedict and Gil's thing. And then literally just today, we've just announced an investment in a company called Wildaway, which is a Dutch business, a phenomenal business. I mean, they are probably the market leaders, have been doing stuff in 11 different countries across Europe. They're doing stuff in Scotland and Ireland. So we've just literally today invested in Wildaway, but we will.
And what do they do as a business?
I mean, they do everything from nature restoration, like Restore, but they also help farmers transition. So they do everything from, almonds and olives in Spain, but all around restoring nature at scale. I mean, leading sort of peatland experts. And so what we realize is that you need developers. We don't want to build a big company. But now all of a sudden in our ecosystem, if we want to know about species reintroduction,
You've got a guy.
you've got a guy.
Yeah.
If you want to know, how did the Dutch do this in 1995? Pick up the phone. If we want to know how to do peatland restoration, pick up the phone. If we want to know how do you do oyster reef, so you'll see us make a few more of these top co-investments. And that's really about how do we provide capital to this sector so that it can grow
And do you take a
develop.
board seat in each of those scenarios?
So far, the fund has been taking a board seat
Yeah.
in those. Yeah.
And is that going to be you personally? on any
I'm
of
no.
those?
And Rini, she's so I'm on Oyster Heaven and on Restore. We haven't determined yet, but we don't do a named individual. It's a
business.
It's a rebalance, and so we want to be able to swap it around. So it's not a named person; it's a Rebalance Earth director.
I love it. We've come close with a couple of those. Bandwidth at the minute and focus, but I love it, and I think it will be 26, 27 will be on our radar to do. I have a list of 5 or 6 target ones. I think Restore's incredibly shrewd. I've got a huge amount of time for Benedict and Gill, and I think at what they do, they are the best I've ever come across.
Yeah, no, that I mean, but it's a good example, and there's another. We're not in this conversation, but we're working on deals together. But Kane and Nico Soulis and Credit
Oh my
Nature,
God, yeah.
and there are so many, and I think that's the unlock. like, how do we? There's a really exciting project that we're working on together that I'd love to see that happen next year.
So we had Kane on a few weeks ago. His next one hasn't come out again yet, but I've got a huge amount of time for Kane. Also, he's not human. Like, that man does not age.
I know.
It's like it's ludicrous. In fact, no, he ages the other way. He gets younger every time he turns up. I've got a huge amount of time for Kane. He's brilliant. We've just January. We're going to get most of the CEOs in the sector together, aren't we, for that conversation piece? And I think that's what's really exciting as well, because collaboratively we span every base, and there's a lot of monopoly pieces on that board that we can hopefully help move things forward for each other. Rob, I adore it when you come in. I always have brilliant conversations. What haven't I asked you wish I had?
Favorite Christmas movie?
We are recording this in December. Oh yeah, Home Alone 2. Oh no, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation.
Yeah, that's
and Muppets Christmas Carol. They're my three.
Die Hard 2.
That's not a Christmas movie.
They are totally Christmas movies. Home Alone.
Favorite Christmas song?
You know what? I'm going to say something controversial. I find Christmas songs I like, hate. There's just like a tipping point where I'm like, I cannot listen to
it's
it.
Wham for me. I still just love it. I just like, however, I've even watched the behind the scenes of what filming that music video was like, and they all say it was bloody awful. I still want to do it.
I used to work in sport and skis, sport and soccer, Sports Direct back in Bristol. This is 1997 to 1995 to late 90s.
Were either of you two born?
I used to.
Excellent, thank you, Al.
If you can imagine now, there'd be like Now Christmas, and it might be 2 hours long. It was 2 CDs. Just can you imagine? You start work at 8, and you finish at 6. And you just listen to that back to back.
Yeah.
I mean, it just for day one.
You can have too much of a good thing, can't you?
I am. I've got I've been scarred by, like, if you work in retail, it just plays back to back. It just
I get it.
It grates.
Mate, thank you. I hugely appreciate it. Absolute pleasure having you in.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you.